Hi, this is Dr. Carolyn Coker-Ross, bringing you the Inclusive Minds podcast. This podcast was inspired by the book of which I'm a co-editor, entitled Anti-Blackness and the Stories of Authentic Allies, Lived Experiences in the Fight Against Institutionalized Racism. If you're a psychologist, a social worker, an addiction professional, or a healthcare provider, or anyone who wants to broaden your horizons, then this podcast is for you. The goal of the podcast is to help you understand some of the more complex issues facing our culture today. My guests are experts in their fields, and we'll be talking about a wide array of topics, including cross-cultural issues, the intersection of race and trauma, social justice, and health inequities. They will be sharing both their lived experiences and their expert opinions. The goal is to give you a felt experience and to let you know that you're not alone in being confused by these complex issues. We want to provide nuanced information with context that will enable you to make your own decisions about these important topics. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Inclusive Minds podcast. Today, my guest is a friend and colleague. Dr. Mazella Fuller is a clinical therapist at Radical Healing Collaborative in Durham, North Carolina. She retired from Duke University after 29 years of service at the Student Counseling Center. She is an integrative health coach and certified eating disorder consultant, and she's one of the editors of our book, Anti-Blackness and the Stories of Authentic Allies. So today we're going to be talking about her particular chapter, which is on authentic allies. So welcome to the show, Mazella.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ross.
Don't be calling me Dr. Ross on this show.
Okay, Carolyn.
We
go
go
way
way
back.
back, way
Indeed.
back. Yeah, actually, Mazella's bio, her tiny, tiny bio, does not really give any evidence of the great deal of work that she's accomplished in her life. And it was her idea that we write the book and, put together this anthology. So, and she and I and the two other editors are co-founders of the Institute for Anti-Racism and Equity. So let me just ask you, why did you want to do this book and edit this book? What was in it for you in your mind?
I think two things, really. It was to blend the lived experiences and stories of BIPOC and just the lived experiences, for one, that the contributors could bring their real stories. And also, when I say blend, I also mean also in a scholarly manner. And you really can't get into scholarly. I think it could be just my bias in Oxford Press. So.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. And I was surprised that they were even interested in the book. Why do you think that they had an interest in it?
Well, when I spoke to some of the editors for us, right, from Oxford Press, it was time. It was time to look at the demographics of, really, at this point, Black stories or Black scholars.
Yeah, and we started working on the book right after the George Floyd murder.
We did, indeed. We started working on the book, and we actually had it sort of 90 to 95% finished by 2022, and sort of a year ahead of because it was scheduled from Oxford Press. They wanted it 2023. But we were so passionate about this book and devoted to getting these stories out that we were really, working ahead of time.
As you know, I've been interviewing a lot of the other authors who contributed to the book, and all of them are very passionate about their work, and it's just really been a pleasure to get to know them all. So I read your chapter, and in your chapter, at some point you say, as BIPOC transition into the professions, more white people must help them smoothly navigate spaces that historically have rejected them. In other words, the time has come for more white people to admit that racism is a white problem and that another kind of allyship is needed to combat systemic racism. What do you think it will take for white people to admit this, and why do you say this?
Well, I think historically, we have not, we as BIPOC, or if we want to just start with indigenous Native Americans, right? Or enslaved people, enslaved Black people, we have not had the power. We don't have the generational wealth. We don't have the generational knowledge. We have history. We have the lived experiences in history, and we're documenting that, as you see across, let's just say globally, but definitely across the United States, in museums and anywhere we can be able to share our experiences. So I think it's all of us need to come to the table. And what I like about allyship, because I'm also an ally to whites too, right? I go to my friends and say, like in this book, I invited several of my white allies to contribute a chapter, and they did, which is I was so pleased about. So I
Yeah.
think I remember one of my allies, I sponsored that individual to do a 1-year residency at Duke University. That's the examples I'm saying. We have to take ownership for, and in the book speaks to it, so I think eloquently in my chapter, as Becky Thompson and Josh Miller talks about what whites have to do. I.e., if it's too, if the fragility is there, then let's do it another way, right? Let's just sponsor someone. Let's just mentor. Let's just move over and make sure when you're in the boardroom, C-suites, or wherever you are, our white allies say, you know what, this doesn't look right in here. We don't have diversity of voices. We don't, we're probably missing some things. So if you don't want to hire people of color or BIPOC people permanently, make sure you have them in some capacity in a leadership role, such as your board, such as your advisory board, consultants, because I'm also, economist, if you say. My first degree was economics, and I understand money, I understand benefits and packages and all that. But there's some really wonderful outside of the box thinking that could be inclusive, such as look at your podcast, Inclusive Minds. And
Yeah,
that's going to be the future. And it's really not the future, it's here now.
exactly. So, how do you define an authentic ally?
The way I've defined it is someone who's willing to speak on your behalf when you're not there, okay? Someone who is willing
That'll
to.
speak behind your back when you're not there.
That's correct. Someone who's willing to speak, to promote you, to talk about what you bring to the organization. That's an authentic ally. And so in the book, I had to make sure that I had authentic allies to help me with my chapter. And so I consider Dr. Thompson and Dr. Miller. I've known them for 30 some years. Actually, Dr. Miller at Smith College, when I was a grad student there in the MSW program in Northampton, Massachusetts, was the first time I took his class on anti-racism, and that was in the early 90s.
Wow.
So I consider people that understand, right into research, going out. Dr. Miller went and participated in Katrina, and he's a social worker by his profession. And so authentic people, they sponsor you. Dr. Miller wrote my reference letter for Duke University. These are the people know your skills, what you bring, and they allow you to be who you are.
Mm.
Also, I think about Dr. Ireland, who is a clinical psychologist, wrote a chapter in our book, who also got her psychology degree from the University of Hawaii, who, went to Duke undergrad, who's really now, just those type of people who know, understand, and have made it their life journey to immerse themselves to understand.
I think we hear so much about people nowadays who are anti-DEI, who are wanting to, instead of mentor Black, Indigenous people of color, to kind of get rid of them. And does it take a movement to increase the number of authentic allies? Or do you think that they have such a wide scope of benefit that it doesn't take that many to make a difference?
Well, I think historically, if we could look back in time, just say, we've always had allies, with the civil rights,
Yeah,
when Swerner and them were drowned, and we have always had white allies. They're willing to Martin Luther King. You can think stories in your community where whites, the abolitionists. So we've always had allies. So
mm,
we don't need to educate people it's out there. We know. And now you have AI. You just say, what is an authentic ally? It'll tell you what it is.
It won't give you the names of the people, though.
No, it won't give you the names because they don't do that, but it'll tell you what it is. So it's just someone who is they got you. They got you. They understand what you need, promotability, economic wealth. We live in a capitalistic society. So and
You have to be able to compete in this society,
absolutely.
economic way, not just,
Yeah, just not just, community wide. Are we gonna be nice to each other? That's fine, and we wanna do that because 'cause we're decent human beings. But there
right,
are other things that people, BIPOC or people of color, and specifically my research area is African Americans or Black, we want the same thing too. We want just, Maslow needs, hierarchy of
yeah,
needs, right? We just want, housing, food, and a means to take care of our families.
yeah, exactly. So another quote from your chapter, which was a great chapter, as all of them
Mhm.
are.
They are,
When
they are.
when black you say, "When Black people express their discriminatory treatment to their white coworkers, many of their white coworkers refer to them as complainers." And you cited some research about the impact of that. How does this fact make allies more important? And how can someone be able to express their needs, someone from the BIPOC community, say in a workplace, express their need for support or mentorship without being considered complainers?
Well, I think, it's two I think I look at it 2 ways. One is if you're in a sponsorship or a mentorship role or a leadership role,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And you have someone you because your white bosses or leadership or they've designated someone that you can talk to or maybe a person within the HR department or somewhere where you can validate and affirm and normalize the
Mhm.
person's experience and not to pathologize the person's experience, right? Because one is normalizing and another is pathologizing. And when you look at the research in terms of whether it's that superwoman syndrome or allostatic load, when people are not validated and affirmed in any way, they begin, then it could be, a sickness, right? Whether there's a mental illness, whether there's a physical illness because of the stress and strain of not being validated, but also the expectation to be productive.
Right.
So if you at, whether whatever organization you have there are expectations for you to meet your role, whatever that role is, and you aren't getting anyone to support or validate what your experience, and you are also witnessing, we don't work in a vacuum, we're not in a vacuum. So you're witnessing people maybe with less challenges or just, I just don't want to deal with my dog today, or I just don't want to, so, oh, my dog is sick, so I'm gonna go home for the rest of the day, or I won't be in for the rest of the week. So you see those things happen and you wonder, well, is this what's going on? And that can be, I mean, it really doesn't bode well for individuals to feel that they're part of the work organizational culture.
Yeah, and even economically, the studies have consistently shown that inclusive workplaces make more money, they make better decisions, they're more creative, and so
Right.
on. So, what do you want people to take away from your chapter?
Well, I really just want people and also to understand the importance of community for Blacks because I grew up in a time, I don't want to date and age myself, but in a time when we were all kind of living together and how important our first mentors, sponsors were maybe our church or teachers in our schools because I in the early years it was pretty much all Black schools before integration. So just kind of looking at how we, would thrive in the communities. There were, whether it was the milkman or the principal, but everyone was kind of in that same community.
Yeah, and I grew up in the same, time period, although I know you're much younger than I am.
I will say.
But, it was kinda like you walked down the street, you couldn't do anything bad because the neighbor would knew your parents and your grandparents likely,
Yes.
and they
True.
would let them know what you were up to, and then your teachers also knew your
Mhm.
parents and grandparents, and there was a so that was one of the advantages of people having that solid
Yeah,
community that we've in some places, we've lost, because
absolutely.
yeah.
Well, migration, moving and all sorts
Yeah.
or gentrification. There's an Asian or something.
Yeah, that's happened, a lot, so that can be a problem. So, other than the sense of community, is there anything else you would like people to take away from your chapter?
I think that's just the importance of how important it is, and especially for our allies and authentic allies or folks who saying they're our allies or want to be our allies, right? Is really to, center otherness, right? Whether that's BIPOC, right? In conversations and making sure that you're fair to all, in terms of recruitment, hiring, so I think those kind of things, just kind of what does it take, and it's a small steps. They
Yeah,
don't have to be huge steps. They can just be,
yeah.
and come
Okay.
and visit. I mean, come into the communities, come into the spaces where BIPOC or blacks are. Just come into those spaces. I mean, there's churches, there's sororities, there are fraternities, there are Masonic temples, there are all sorts of places that we do some type of community engagement and outreach.
Yeah, I know in LA they have a big, a market, like, fair, once a month that,
Yeah.
attracts Black vendors from all over, and I think that's another opportunity.
Oh, yes,
So
absolutely.
really just getting yourself exposed so that you're
Absolutely.
more comfortable and more able to understand what your role could possibly be. And then finally, is intentionality and equity important?
Very, very much, and it's gonna save all of us, right? It's just not for, BIPOC, Black and Black BIPOC people or, indigenous people or other color people of color. It is you have to be intentional, and intentional, it's a win-win for everybody because you aren't just going to select people well, it doesn't work when you select people who are just, gonna be, not thinking strategically, right? Because there's, when you think about intentionality and equity, kind of what does that mean and how are people defining that? Because it's not, it should not be that you're going to have someone that's going to be blind obedient or participatory obedience to a cause when they know it's not right.
Mm.
So how to align yourself with people that you will take are willing to take risks, but are willing to also work with you, right?
Mm.
Intentionality of that. And folks, and then, you're just gonna vet people, right? You're gonna, you're looking at vetting people who've had lived experiences as well as research in whatever that way, whether that's quantitative or qualitative.
Yeah. So what gives you hope in these troubling times?
You know, my ancestors, really, to be honest, because if they gave up, you and I wouldn't be able to do this
We
podcast.
wouldn't be here.
We would not be here. We would
Yeah,
not be
or
here.
we would
So
be here in a different format.
that's correct, in a different way. So they did it. I know with all the resources I have, I can survive. So I say my ancestors, and I also say I have my youngest grandniece. Just turned 2. Then there's one that's just turned 3 who live out in Saratoga, California, where you kinda near out, but
Mhm.
or it's really northern, but still.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and then the other one is 5. So there's like a 2-year-old,
Mhm.
2 3-year-olds, and a 5-year-old. I have hope for them. Just
And
be
we need to do work for them.
That's correct.
You know, I would have nightmares just thinking that my kids are inheriting a world that's worse than the world that I or the country that I lived in. No,
Absolutely.
so I don't wanna leave it to my children and grandchildren worse off than when it was.
Then that's
Yeah.
right. So we have to continue to, run this marathon and this race. And it is a race. It's not, it's not we're never going to get to a destiny. You just keep on keeping on and listening to, passing because they're all, as you well know, Carolyn, we have generational knowledge too, right? That we want to pass down, which is
Wisdom.
yes, the wisdom. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Doctor Fuller, for being on the podcast. Always great to speak to you.
You too, and thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this. Look forward to our continued journey together, Dr. Ross, and our work together.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to the Inclusive Minds podcast so we can let you know when the next great guest comes on. The link to subscribe is in the caption below.